So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask of the ex officios, they're willing. Of course he does.
Do we have to
well, which ex officios do we still have here?
We've got Elaine, Deborah.
Only Christine from ARC had to leave.
Oh, and Mike siding around the corner.
Well, you know, I fortunately have questions for all of them. So I'm not going to, you know, sort of ask them all at once. But I do think that, you know, we should at least provide an opportunity for each of them to have some interactions with us. I'd like to start with Mark, if that's possible. You know, Mark, we had some testimony from Mary Schweitzer, who was in the audience. She's no longer here. The prior time we had this meeting, she was actually on the floor in a wheelchair. Now we see her basically functional. She's walking to the mic. She seems to have restored some of her functioning. We've heard reports of other people who are actually in the audience with a similar situation. The difference has been that those individuals are now on Ampligen. They weren't on before. I'm not suggesting to you that Ampligen is kind of the thing that's going to cure everybody with this illness, ME/CFS, but it does suggest that there's a certain group of individuals who seems to respond very well when they're on Ampligen, sometimes even after. The fact that we have no drugs that are really allowed to have FDA approval for individuals, the close to 1 million people with this illness, I think is a significant problem. I once again would like you to respond to the issue of why the FDA is not doing anything in this situation, and is it going to take people protesting outside of your building to make your agency change?
Research does not conduct the research that develops products for therapeutic uses. We review products and we approve products based on substantial evidence of efficacy and safety from adequate, well-controlled trials. We review applications, and unfortunately I'm not able to, by law, to comment on the status of any investigative new drug exemption, IND, or any new drug application that has not been approved. Products that are approved, NDAs that are approved, unfortunately this is the law. It would be a criminal offense if I started to speak about confidential information, and until the law is changed, I am not able to do otherwise.
So maybe I can ask the question a slightly different way, and again, I'm really, as a member of the committee, trying to understand. I certainly don't understand the regulations that are over you, and I appreciate the fact that you have limitations with what you can say or do. I guess the question I keeps coming to me is that in the HIV/AIDS community, there was a significant amount of tension at one point about the approval process, and for some good reasons, things got expedited in that arena. I'm not sure how that happened, but is there anything we can learn from the struggles that occurred 15, 20 years ago that can be replicated today with a situation that's probably just as urgent?
Or add to that the approval of Lyrica and Cymbalta as the first drugs treating fibromyalgia.
I'll comment on HIV development. I think you said an important word, HIV. Many people around this table were around when the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome became an important public health problem. But it was only after the discovery of the virus that effective therapeutics were identified, were tested, the products were evaluated in clinical trials, and substantial evidence from adequate, well-controlled trials of their safety and efficacy allowed these products to be approved. AZT was approved, didanosine was approved also. We did establish methods, and we did use accelerated approval regulations that were eventually implemented under Subpart H, which have allowed other products to be approved. And I would say that now more than 30 different products have been approved for HIV. But the first step was that there was a better understanding of the etiology that did allow us to have models and that would allow us to select molecules that would have a therapeutic action. I think we're dealing, again, with a very complex systemic disease right now, where it is very difficult to identify which is a particular approach that's going to lead to the ability to select 1 out of 10,000 molecules that is going to be able to be used in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical studies.
So is the problem that the makers of Ampligen haven't provided, at least as of today, adequate evidence of the efficacy in treatment, and that they're the what?
He's not
Let me ask a different question. Are they the ones who would typically, the drug maker would typically be the one who would promote it to the FDA? So the makers of Ampligen would have some obligation on behalf of chronic fatigue syndrome patients to push the drug if they're not.
I cannot comment on Ampligen or the development of any product right now that is under an IND or an NDA, but I must reiterate that it is not the FDA that conducts studies. Drug development is initiated by sponsors, by investigators, by academics, by pharmaceutical companies, by different groups that conduct the studies and do the development and provide the data that eventually is available for our review. We provide guidance on this. We have all that is detailed in different areas of our ever-growing website right now, and we've applied this very successfully to HIV, to oncology products, to products for multiple sclerosis, to products for tuberculosis, to products for many other conditions. I cannot comment about the status about the clinical development for products for chronic fatigue syndrome. I can just say that, as we have understood before, that it's not the same situation as a condition such as AIDS, where you do have an identified etiological agent that allows you to make the next steps.
So how did a drug like Lyrica get approved for fibromyalgia? Because there isn't an identified agent that would act on.
The basis of the approval of fibromyalgia can be found in the new drug application. I'm not familiar with that particular application, but that is an approved product, and therefore the basis of that approval is public knowledge. Information can be obtained through the Freedom of Information. Products that there's also another place to go and look at would be at drugs at FDA, where if you look up the information about the different actions on the on that product, you will be able to find things such as the approval letters, the reviews, and other information that will give you the basis of that.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but the conditions have similar problems on what's actually going on. And actually, I believe more is known about chronic fatigue syndrome than fibromyalgia, but that may or may not be the case. So I was just curious.
Is it the case that drugs that are approved for other conditions have a different path to approval, Mark? Is that the...
No, there is only one path of approval. Well, the regulations still require that there be substantial evidence of safety and efficacy based on adequate, well-controlled trials. That is still the standard.
But for a given clinical indication for a specific product, drug X is for an indication in disease Y. It may not be to, quote, treat disease Y. Is that an accurate statement? FDA gives approval for a specific clinical indication in a given disease, not for the treatment of the disease.
The approval is for the product, and the indication is written based on the information that is in the new drug application.
Because the FDA all the time will jump all over pharmaceutical companies because they're trying to, quote, extend, unquote, the application of their drug to non-approved indications. Is that not true?
Off-label use.
Well, the drug company, that's how the FDA sees it. The drug company doesn't see it that way, but the FDA is very specific in the margin of which they give. In the drugs that I deal with, they're very specific in the margin in which any kind of a claim, a therapeutic claim, can be made. And it's not to treat a disease, it's to treat a specific indication in the disease when they hold forth of that. Am I being accurate in that?
I think it would take a very long time to explain all the details of this. However...
Generally, am I being accurate?
I would recommend that you go to our website where there's more information about that, about the basis for approval of products.
I'm sorry, then let me ask you another specific question. That was really a comment. What I recall back from the HIV days as they came out with these drugs and the rapid progression to approval, and with the angst that there was for the potential side effect profile, etc., there was a general sense that the rapidity of which the approval went on was somewhat commensurate with the risk of the illness in an untreated state. Now, I understand that the FDA did not have rules that said that. We'll cut corners if it's more dangerous drug. In fact, there was specific denial of that sort of thing back in the 80s and the early 90s when this active development was going on. But is it inaccurate to suggest, I want to say this right because I'm just asking for your understanding as a representative. Is it accurate to say that the higher the morbidity, mortality risk in an untreated illness of any sort, the more latitude there is in the FDA where the safety concern is commensurate with and the risk for treating is commensurate with the consequence of not treating. They're going to die sooner, or or the morbidity of the illness is going to be incapacitated. Is that a statement that has no validity, in fact?
That's a very leading question. I think, let me reduce this maybe to something that is easier to understand and explain with the brief time that we have. I think that in the review of every product, we always take into consideration the risk and benefit. And obviously, the risk-benefit equation will be different. For example, when we're speaking about a product for an oncology indication. Many of the products that we've approved for oncology indications do have a very high toxicity profile, but they have substantial evidence of efficacy, and the judgment has been made that there is a positive risk-benefit balance in that indication. Products for immunosuppressants for solid organ transplantation do have their own safety profile, but that there again, the risk-benefit equation is a positive one that is always taken into consideration. And when there's uncertainty about this, we will take this to an advisory committee and actually under the FDA Amendment Act of 2007, all the molecular entities that are submitted as an NDA are taken before an advisory committee, and that may be one of the things that is taken into consideration. But if you look across the spectrum of products that have been approved, biologics and drugs at the FDA, they all have different levels of safety, but also these also are taken into consideration when we're looking at the risk-benefit. We're not going to evaluate a product for, let's say, a melanoma or pancreatic cancer the same way that we're going to evaluate a product for itchy skin.